All right, so we'll go ahead and get started, and welcome to IMC 353 Journalism 353 in a new setting. This is our first time to venture out of the classroom, but we wanted to have an opportunity to video this and kind of get it on record with some of the important things that they're doing here. So, first thing I'll do is just welcome Dr. Hunter Taylor and Coach Chris Cutcliffe to our um, classroom setting, I guess you would say. And I would say that Hunter and I, okay to call you Hunter and Chris,
Oh yeah.
Hunter and I have gotten to know each other just in the last 2 or 3 years, 3 or 4 years before the pandemic stopped everybody from meeting people and getting to know each other. And it was through writing. I mean, we started
Yep.
in that regard, just talking about writing. He met with a group of mine a couple times, and so we've developed a friendship that way. Chris Cutcliffe, I've known quite a
Long time.
while since he first arrived in Oxford, and obviously covered his father's teams when they were here, living here, and coaching here. And some of the most fun days I ever had in my media career were covering his father's teams and getting to know them, his father and mother, and the family. So glad to have Chris here still with us. And so again, I'm glad that they're here. And what I'd like to say first is that I began to do a little research for this. Hunter sent me some things with some things that they were doing as far as their website, their podcasts, their books that they've worked on, and different things like that. And it's in the short term, and I need to stop talking to let them talk. In the short term, it'll be interesting to see how far we can get in all that they're doing, because it's pretty amazing some of the things that they are working on together, and that they're doing to really from a leadership role, wouldn't you say? And I'll just kick it off with either one of you that wants to start with that, and basically how this kind of evolved into what you're doing, and maybe just what you call it.
Absolutely. You want to kick it off?
Yeah. So I guess, I'll kind of talk about how we started working together and kind of start, from there, from the beginning. And so, I'm Chris Cutcliffe. I'm the head football coach at Oxford High School, and so Hunter had recently come on board here at Ole Miss in the School of Ed as a professor, and so we were connected through Dr. Andy Mullins, and Dr. Mullins knew about the research that Hunter had done for his dissertation concerning some of the common traits amongst some of the most successful high school football coaches in the state of Texas, and in particular looking at the positive impact that their school and their football program had on their community as a whole, and kind of drawing some similarities from those programs out. And so Hunter just emailed me one day, I guess it was 2017, and kind of emailed me a copy of the dissertation and said, hey, this is some research I've done. Dr. Mullins thought that maybe we could connect, and would you be interested in getting together and talking sometime? And so I looked. I was in the middle of football season, so I didn't read the entire dissertation. I kind of briefly scanned it that first day, and was like, this is a gold mine, of information and knowledge from some experts in the field. So I immediately was like, yes, hey, let's get together. And what we did was Hunter came and observed our football program at Oxford for a week, and just kind of like a fly on the wall perspective, took notes. And we met the following week. We had an off week the following week, and so we got together, I think the next Monday after that, and went through his notes. And it was awesome for me because there were some good things, right, that we're kind of like validating, I guess. Hey, yeah, he's seeing this. This is good. This is good. But then there were also some things that Hunter was like, hey, here's some things that you can get better at, right? These are just things I noticed, and so it's not very often, I think, in any setting, but certainly in a professional setting, that you can have somebody come in and give you honest, constructive feedback, and then also, probably even more importantly, be willing and wanting to be, part of the solution to some of these things. And so Hunter and I started meeting together weekly at that point, and really started collaborating on Oxford football, on Mississippi Teacher Corps, and just both of us, our areas that we're in professionally, and We started developing a leadership kind of framework and education program that we do with our football team. And, we kind of, as we got deep into that, we thought it was something that was kind of worth sharing with people because we thought there was some good stuff. I don't know if you want to left anything out or anything there you could add.
Your take on that?
I mean, the program was always really good. Chris is phenomenal as a coach. I mean, obviously you know that because you played for him. But anybody around here, if you've spent any time with him and the rest of his staff, I mean, they're extraordinary. So it was like there's this sweet spot that happens whenever a friendship first develops or a partnership or whatever you want to say, where like honesty is really easy, right? Because you don't have anything to lose necessarily, right? Like it's just, I'd say the longer you have friends, the longer a friendship is, it gets tricky, right? Of like telling each other different things of like, hey, you may want to change this or you may want to change that. And I never, I mean, I knew how good he was and whatnot, so I would just kind of like say, hey, I've seen it done this way. It's just another way of doing it. Just something for you to consider. But he was always the decision maker, he and his staff. But it was this really cool thing that happened where we both started, I guess, our friendship of there's just like a common core set of values of we wanted to be as good as we possibly could. But there was a way that we believed probably like a shared values of like how to go about getting end results, right? And so like what things that you aspire for your students that you teach, for the players that he coaches, for all of those types of things, the interactions where you want them to be transformational, not transactional. And so I think my father's a coach. I coached for a little bit. Chris, obviously, his father's one of the greatest coaches ever, and Chris is a phenomenal coach. And there's like, I think sometimes you can get a little jaded if you're in athletics long enough to see a lot of like transactional things happen, right? And so like if this person performs at this level, then they're treated a certain way. But if you don't, then you're probably going to be disregarded, right? Like that's the bad side of it. And I think both of us just felt a strong desire to always try and redeem those spaces, if you will, to where you're really trying to build organizations or programs or teams or whatever you want to call it, where that is the core value that, hey, this is something that's just going to propel anybody that's a part of this to their next phase, right? This is a temporary time in your life when you get to be a part of Jeff's class right here. There's a temporary season of life where you get to be enrolled here at the university. There's a temporary season where you get to be a player for Chris or enrolled in the teacher corps. And so we always wanted that to be something that was memorable, but you never felt used. You were always propelled to greater good, and you look back fondly on those experiences, and then you can't wait to also give back to those things. So I hope I explained that fairly well.
Good start.
Yeah.
Both of you are coaches' sons. I know you are, right? Your dad was a coach. Wasn't he just inducted into a Hall of Fame?
Yeah, he was.
In
It was a big
Texas?
deal, yeah.
So you start with that and tell us about that recent honor that he received, but also his influence on you. And obviously, both of you have been around some really big-time
Right.
sports.
Right. I think one of the cool things also about our friendship is it's like we're coaches' sons in two different contexts, right? So I think Chris's father is probably one of the greatest college coaches ever. I'm really biased because I think my father's one of the best high school coaches ever, okay? And so he was just recently inducted in the Southeast Texas Coach Hall of Fame. I think he's coached now, I lose track, it's like 46 years, something like that.
Right. Yeah.
I think that's it. And so, like, I'm an only child. We have 3 little boys. And so my mom and him, especially, they were at a season where they wanted to be around our grandkids or whatnot. My father still wants to coach, though. I mean, he's always taken the viewpoint of, like, if his health is good and you just – there's a season of life where sometimes that can fade away or whatnot. He wants to be useful, and he is, like – he's somebody that figured out his calling early on, and you can almost be like super jealous of people like that. He knew exactly what he wanted to do, and then he just has gone into the profession with this vigor that it hasn't exterminated. And so he'll turn 71 this summer, and he still has so much passion about the game of football. He loves football, but he loves what it does for people that the players that they get to be a part of that program. And so it was really cool. I think it probably tied us even more so as 3 years ago, Chris lost his offensive line coach, a guy named Sam McCorkle. I'm sure Chris will talk about him of like he was another great coach, but he ended up retiring and moving down to Meridian. So there was an open spot. And so we had known each other for a couple of years, and we had talked about it. I said, hey, I think we both knew, hey, this is an option. It'd be pretty cool if it fit, all that kind of stuff. So my parents moved up here 3 years ago. My dad he is Chris's offensive line coach, and so, and that's just kind of a fun thing. I mean, there's, I think I love how, I think we get so caught up when we say the word diversity right now. We start thinking about it from an ethnic standpoint. But like age diversity I think is so important in an organization, right? Is like there's levels of experience. There's different roles for people, whether it's mentorship, whether it's they're so young and gung ho about wanting to be a professional, and then there's like people that are starting to get to a certain level of mastery. And hopefully you try and curate whatever organization team that you are with all of these seasons of life. And that's one thing I really admire about Chris is like, he values my father, and my father's, in a season where I think he's got a certain level of experience and knowledge that's just really, it's like I think you're foolish if you don't listen to him. And he's a trip now. I mean, he's a lot of energy and very strong in his beliefs.
Maybe I should have had him speak. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah,
He'd be a
but
good one.
at the same time, like
We should have had him on the panel.
you should have, because he would have hijacked. I mean, he would have taken over this thing.
He would have.
That's another time.
Yeah, but this is. But I'm very proud of him. I've learned a lot from him. I think both of us have grown up in locker rooms and around teams. So I think you learn at an early age, like the world does not revolve around you, which is a good thing to know. It was a really good thing for me to know as an only child. And so he made sure I was in certain contexts, whether that was a locker room and this team, whatever. Get up, we're serving. Get up. You need to be helping, however early you are. And there's a shared sense of like you need to be happy for people that are excelling, even though you're not the one that maybe at the time is excelling. Like there's a way of life and certain things that I think we both learn and really value and want to pass on to the teams that we kind of oversee now.
So, Chris, I would say I think I remember you being on the sidelines here with your dad some when he was coaching, but only for the victories, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Not for
That's
the
right.
losses. Talk about maybe a little bit of his influence on you, which is obviously great, but just any number of directions you want to go with.
Yeah.
Coach Senior Cutcliffe.
Yeah, no doubt. And I'll echo what he said about his father, Bruce Taylor, is an incredible man, an incredible football coach, and I know I've learned a lot from him in the last 3 years. And I'll tell you one thing about him real quick that I thought was one of the coolest things. He mentioned the Southeast Texas Coaches Hall of Fame that he was inducted into, and I went down for the ceremony. I guess that was in January, and so Coach Taylor was a head baseball coach of a team 45 years ago, and that day, so that Saturday morning before his induction ceremony, I think all 9 starters on his baseball team from 45 years ago came to the induction ceremony, right? And so these guys are in their 60s at this point, right? And so you think about the relationships that can form from being a part of a team, and that's really, really special. I mean, you don't see that happen very often, and that says a lot about Coach Taylor and the impact he has on people. My dad, people ask all the time about, what I've learned from my dad, and, I no doubt have learned some football and X's and O's and fundamentals and things like that. But the number one thing I learned from watching my dad coach over the years was how to treat people, right? And just what Hunter said, not be transactional in nature, not use people, but value people and really care about people. And, from a very young age, my mom and my dad, my mom was a teacher for 18 years. My dad started out as a high school teacher and coach before he moved into college. And so, from a young age, I just remember watching them have a positive impact on young people, and I knew that's what I wanted to do. I have a vivid memory of being at West Town Mall in Knoxville, Tennessee, and being there with my mom, and I was probably, 6 or 7, and a teenage boy comes running up and gives my mom a hug and is so happy to see her, and she had taught him in first grade, however many years before. And my dad, one of my favorite things about our football program is it was my favorite thing about being around Ole Miss football, Tennessee football, Duke football with my dad over the years was all of the former players coming back, right, and seeing those relationships that meant so much, and and that continues to this day, and you see people that were a part of a team or a group 20 or 30 years ago, that still care about each other and still want to get back together and spend time together, and I think that's one of the greatest things, one of the coolest things, and so that had a huge impact on me as a young person, as I wanted to be in a profession where I could hopefully have a positive impact on young people, and I wanted to be a part of a team and organization like that, which we can get into in a little while. Now, through the research we've done, we see referred to as a thick institution or a thick organization, and so we can talk a little bit about what that means later. But I saw it my whole life growing up, didn't know what it was, didn't know what it was called, what the benchmarks were, but I saw it my whole life and knew that was something that was special and something I wanted to be a part of. And so, that's no doubt the biggest impact that my dad and my mom have had on me was seeing them, kind of give of themselves to hopefully make a positive impact on young people.
I need to add one thing.
Yes.
He talked about his mom too, so I need to make sure to do that too. Because it was, my mom is the same way. Like when you're talking about, there's like this, it's almost like it's a partnership profession in a sense, right? To do it in a way where mentorship is at its highest level is like, my mom's been with my father every step of the way as far as, the hospitality of having kids over to the house and showing up. My mom's seen more games than. She's a pretty good evaluator by now too, and
She can coach.
She cooks the O-line breakfast about 3 days a week right now, I think. So
she's an extraordinary person. So again, I would say that too, of like seeing a work ethic, and again a way of an unselfishness and championing other people and celebrating other people. I learned that a lot from my mom. My mom celebrates people really, really well.
So these students in here will know that I always have a story or throw something in.
Yeah.
So this one will be brief. But Dr. Norton and I would remember this, but your Uncle Eddie was an assistant basketball coach at Ole Miss
he sure
when
was.
I was in college with Coach Weltlick here. And your mom, I think, reminded me of that when y'all showed up. Like your my brother used to coach here. So lots of connections throughout this whole situation. But you talked about how to build a thick institution. Is that what it's called?
Yes.
And that's your book.
Yeah.
Is that also just the whole scope of everything, and just take it and run with that a little bit, and maybe let them know what that's a little bit more all about?
For sure. We first used it as the title of a TED Talk that we gave a couple of years ago. And again, it's like a play off of, there was an article written by David Brooks. If you ever read his stuff, he's a columnist in the Times. And this came from a professor at the University of Virginia named James Davidson Hunter. And they looked at it more from a political side. But it was more, Brooks took it, and in the article he published, I think the title of the article is called How to Leave a Mark on People. And what he would do is look at a lot of civic organizations. He was writing about it's a great time in our country where we need to start these type of things again, whether that's the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, the Rotary Club, like all these type things. Like, but he kind of like unpacked, what makes a police department so tight knit, what makes the New York Fire Department so tight knit. If you and I met and we both attended the same summer camp, maybe at different points in our life, and we met, there's probably a common bond once we got to that common thing that we both experienced, that we'd be like, oh, I bet you value this too. We wouldn't say those exact words, but you know what I mean, of like, there are certain things that exist, certain organizations or experiences where there's like values embedded in them, where like you're kind of choosing to be a part of that too. So you're almost saying like, hey, these are the values that I think are important too. That's a part of this organization, so I'm gladly going to step into it. I remember, I think the even some of the colleges they mentioned, if you ever meet someone that attended Morehouse or attended West Point, or I think here at the University of Mississippi, same way, is there's just some shared experiences, kind of a deal where, there's some shared values that we both believe strongly in. So when we said that, we were like, hey, this is basically what we're trying to do with Chris's program, with this football program. We're like, if you met somebody that played in the organization, played for the team 20 years before you or 10 years after you, and y'all met at an alumni gathering or something, or you met somewhere on the square, like you'd immediately have like this shared uh, this shared experiences that are really a part of forming you into who you are today. And you just hold that experience or that organization or that team with this high amount of reverence, right? And so that's I think that's something that Chris I know holds deeply of that he didn't want it to just be how far they're winning, and they've won a lot obviously, but you want it to be something more than that that ties people together, and that anybody that comes through the program feels so strongly about this, and they also for their next phase of life, I mean they have some confidence to them that they've already gone through this type of program, they've been formed and shaped, and they feel strongly that their next phase of life they can walk in it and be successful. So that's where the term came.
Yeah, no doubt. And I would say one of the things that we talked a lot about, still talk a lot about, but certainly early on was the idea. Like I think in athletics, there's things you hear all the time about important life lessons that you learn from playing a sport or from being a part of a team or different things like that. And I think most of the time, people just kind of hope that happens, or it just kind of happens naturally, right? And so we wanted to be intentional about creating that. We wanted to, intentionally embed, these important life lessons that you do learn from playing sports or from being a member of a team. And like you mentioned, the world doesn't revolve around you. There's something bigger than yourself. There's so many different valuable lessons you can learn. So we wanted to be more intentional about passing those lessons and those values on instead of just kind of letting it happen or hoping it happened.
So the book was a result of all that, and that
Yeah,
was
it's like taking
I know
the,
one book that took me a long time to do. How did y'all put that together, and how did it come about? Really?
yeah. I mean, I think we have great respect for anybody that's written a book, because even though I think we had certain ideas that we felt like we could put together pretty quickly because we had been working on this stuff. We gave a talk, and we wanted to take the talk and almost put it in bite-sized chunks and chapters. Right? It's a lot of work. I mean, it's really hard.
But rewarding.
But
It is
rewarding.
rewarding.
But there's just like, from an editing standpoint, there's just so many aspects of it that it's not just you sat at your desk one night and decided to write this and bam, there it's out, right? But it's, I think in it too, we wanted some specifics in there. I think a lot of times in education is probably guilty of this in a lot of forms, is there's a lot of jargon spoken when you go to a conference or a clinic or something like that, and so you can tell from the enthusiasm of the one presenting it that, wow, this is something that must really work. I'd love to try it, but I'm still confused on how to try it, or like I think what you're talking about is so specific to you. My context is different, so I don't think it'll work. I think that's really cool what you're doing, but I need something I can take and shape. And so we worked really hard about having some specifics in a process that someone can go through with their. We first looked at it like as a coaching staff, we could take it and do it with their players, but really it's generic enough too, where like just a leadership staff of whatever organization can take it and run with it. But there are action items, specific steps that they need to create and reflect on in a timely way of doing it. And then the cool thing with a book, as you know, is you remember stories, like stories attached with that. I mean, they come to fruition. They awaken your senses. That's why you wrote a book about Jim. Like that. Like there's a narrative that stirs people up. And they're like, oh, I'm in. Like I want to do this, or I really love the story, and it makes me want to read the entire thing, etc. So it was a chance for us also to speak about the unique season that they won the state championship, but then also there's a way like we honor people that have influenced us along the way, like some bite-sized.
As some of the coaches and others in the book.
Got it. I mean, and so there's like little bite-sized stories of a time or something that we got from someone, because you need to give credit for who you got things from.
Mm.
It's an apprenticeship profession, and I think a lot of teaching is, right? Like somebody came up with this, they passed it to you, you kind of added to it, then you pass it to the next generation of students. So we wanted to honor that.
So, as a math teacher and a football coach, do you ever think you'll be an author?
I probably not, to be honest. And
I didn't mean to paint you in that
no,
small a
yeah,
box. But
no, I don't know. No, I didn't. When we started talking about it, I don't know. I'd always there's a few people I like that I knew that had written books, and I always thought that was really cool, and I guess admired it. But no, I didn't think I would ever do that. But I don't know that I would say I know I would have been very difficult to do without Hunter, because he really helped me a lot, and he's a much better writer than I am. It took, I don't know. My wife, my wife and I have very different writing styles, so I always let her edit my stuff too, and that's always a lot of fun. But
good to have somebody to work with on.
no
yours.
doubt,
Yeah.
and to give, like you mentioned earlier, honest feedback is extremely helpful, right? And too many relationships aren't willing to give honest feedback, and so. But no, I didn't think I would do it, but it was a lot of fun to do. It was fun to I guess, like you said, like you have this kind of big idea and you know what you want to get across, but the process of, making it concise and, choosing your words carefully and kind of crafting exactly what you want it to be like, that was a lot of fun, but it was also a lot of work.
And you're writing another book. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, and it's about to be out, right?
Yeah, it's about to be out.
And tell them about that a little bit. If
That's
ready
fine.
to tell it because I've
And
seen
this
it.
was something, and Chris knew about this when I first came. This was something I wanted to chip away at. I think it's something that like you get influenced by people on campus around town that you really revere. Is I love how people write about place and about like when you and I would talk, and you would talk about the town you're from and certain connections between coaches that spent time there. So I'm originally, Oxford is our home. My wife and I, and this is our kids' home. So I don't want to discount that. But it's like I grew up in a small rural town in northeast Texas, and my father was a high school coach, right? So this is a big part of our narratives, of like, so in that part of Texas, it's kind of an overlooked area because we don't have a major city, we don't have a major university, we don't have a major sports team, and there's that exists in other pockets of the state. So high school sports gets magnified, and it becomes the way that you connect with somebody through conversation. So if I meet you at a restaurant, we're probably talking about this team, this coach. It's like a way to connect and then get to the real stuff that you actually want to talk about that maybe is more personal to you about your family and stuff. But that's the roadmap you have to take in that part. And so I think it was one of those deals where there's a friend of mine, and Chris knows him too. We got to go spend some time with him when he was at the University of Arkansas. He was a high school coach there, and he was one of the subjects in the dissertation. The thing I loved most about his subject, the coach's name is Jeff Traylor. Jeff is now the head football coach at UTSA. They had a phenomenal season. If you follow college sports, won 12 games this past year. I think he was a finalist for National Coach of the Year. There's a buzz about him for sure. But he's the first one that's from that area that's kind of left and gone to a major. So I think sometimes maybe there's I don't want to say a chip on your shoulder if you're from certain parts that you think are overlooked and you think maybe aren't as like maybe like the greatest ideas don't come from that area. They come from the metropolitan area, whatever it may be. I love the fact that he was from that area. He was mentored by coaches in that area. He has a lot of friendships from coaches around in there. When I coached in that area, I was one of the young guys, and there were a lot that he would pour into. I thought that was so cool. And like he built his whole career there, and then when it was time to leave, he made the big jump. And so like you were trained in an area under certain people that don't get asked to speak on big stages at places like this or the university, whatever it may be, right? And so I loved that because I think he's brilliant. But the other part that I loved about his story and his subject area is it really gave a sense into the staff that was around him. And I've never read a coaching book or a sports book that wasn't just highlighting the head coach and or the best player on the team, right? It's normally those are the ones that everybody knows about, so you gravitate. I love like there were some guys like Matt Turner, Alan Metzel, Keith Tate, Olin Johnson, Todd Barr. I love that you got a chance to understand what they brought and their specific knowledge and how they shaped a culture and how many student athletes, kids that they helped, a community that even in East Texas, that community I don't think gets a lot of, it did not historically get a lot of credit as being a place you'd move to or send your kid to school there. And they've changed it. Like the narrative is switched. And it's taken 20 years. I mean, this wasn't like a 2-year deal. But then even when Jeff left, it was passed on to the top assistant, and they and they continued to win. And then that person left and joined Jeff, and the next assistant took over, and they've continued to win.
So this is what your book is.
It's what the
all
book's about.
It's called Draw the Line.
It's called Draw the Line.
And where did that come?
So there's two storylines. I wanted to weave it in. If you've ever seen I know it's on Netflix now, but I forget who broadcast it first. Maybe it was ABC or ESPN. The Last Dance, right? And this was Michael Jordan's story with the Bulls. You remember how the storytelling was, where it was the last season that they're all together, and then it would weave kind of back and forth. So you had the story of like kind of Jordan's ascension, how he began with the Bulls all the way up until this moment, and then you've got the last season that's going back and forth. It's the same way with this one. So Draw the Line is a rallying cry they used during the playoffs leading up to this big game that they were playing in the playoffs. Draw the line. It actually comes from Marcus Luttrell. If you remember the lone survivor, the Navy SEAL, that was something they got from him from a talk where I guess he had to, when he was wounded, he like would take his gun and he would draw a line in the sand and then he would pull himself up because he couldn't use the rest of his body. He'd pull himself up, and then he'd do that over and over again. And Jeff used that as a mantra of like, hey, there's going to be a time in this game where it's going to be tight, and we're going to have to, figuratively draw a line, and you're going to have to will yourself to do this stuff that's really hard. Football's a tough game, right? And so that's where that rallying cry came from. But it looks at the 2014 season, which was the original staff's last year together, and there was a human interest died. They had a player pass away the spring before the season entered. They had a quarterback who had left and transferred back in, and there's like a redemption story in that. And then they had a transfer come in that was controversial. And then they had kind of like this star player who'd grown up there that just kind of had to come into his own maturity level. So it was like a team that had fascinating side from both coach and player standpoint. And then I guess the weave is telling how the staff, who they learned under in these other, it gives nods to other East Texas coaches in these towns of like, you're documenting the work that's been done by some people I don't think has been correctly looked at.
Right.
And giving them credit to this ascension of why this area is so unique. And I think it's unique. I mean, it's where my wife and I are from. So, there's always a tie there. Even though we don't live there, you want to honor that. And I love trying to do that.
So your book Together is out, and you can buy it now. That one will be out this summer?
Yeah.
And you can already pre-buy?
Can't yet. We're working on getting that. So
you can put it on your list to buys. Since we're into the writing aspect, already talking about it a little bit, and this is a sports writing class, and y'all been around sports through yourselves and coaches. Some of the, I always say this, some of these people in this room will do this for a career.
Right.
Some of them will never write a sports story again because they're going to do something else, and they're just enjoying the moment of being in this class, hopefully. Your thoughts on your dealings with sports writers? I know there's some in here that you've talked to over the years. I don't think dealing is a good word. Maybe just your interaction with sports writers, some comments on what you've seen from the best way to go hand in hand and work with the media, as you have to do all the time, especially in this day and age. I mean, there was a time when high school coaches probably never, maybe once a week for a few minutes or something. Now, often
it is. I do a lot for sure. And Jared and Adam are both in here, and I've done a lot with those two guys over the years. Had great experiences with both of them. I think. From a high school standpoint, I would say the only I'm not going to say any names or anything. I can only think of one negative experience I've ever had with a sports journalist, and I think dealing with high school athletes, um, they are children, and I think remembering that is an important aspect of covering high school age students. They're not college athletes playing in the SEC. They're not professional athletes. They are children in high school. I mean, they may be 6'5",
Big
300
children.
pounds, but they're children. And so I just think keeping that perspective would be one thing I would mention. But I've had an awesome experience doing that. I've enjoyed doing interviews, and Adam and I talk normally once a week during football season. Either he comes in to see me, or we talk by phone. And Jared's covered our games at Oxford for a long time, and done a lot of interviews with Jared on the field after games and at practice. And so it looks a lot of different ways, I guess, whether it's by phone, whether it's in person, at game days, practice days, whatever the case may be. We don't do like a press conference kind of style setting, that maybe you would see at at Ole Miss or at the college level. But I've had great interactions doing that. And, and I think kind of working together, to the benefit of the student athletes. I think we're all, I just think that's been a very positive thing for me when I, see, you see great positive stories about, these kids and things like that. That's a great thing for them and their parents. And so I've really enjoyed that for sure over the years.
Before I give it to Hunter to answer that type thing too, I will say this to you guys, and Dr. Norton may remember these days, but when I was working at the Oxford Eagle, which doesn't seem like all that long ago to me, but it has been a while. Certainly in the pre-internet era, Don Witten, who you may remember was our sports editor that I worked for and had known for a long time, we did not talk to high school players. We did not interview them. You can't do that anymore because there's so much social media and other things and recruiting and everything. But Don says, as you said, we didn't necessarily call them children, maybe, but we said, they're not ready yet.
Yeah,
so
and they probably wouldn't like being called that, but that's the truth. But yeah. I would tell you, I'm always a little bit nervous when a high school player gets interviewed on the field immediately after the game, because emotions are high, and I'm always a little bit nervous about what they might say, because they don't necessarily go through any real preparation, which is maybe a failure on my part.
Well, no, I think there may be some things that schools are learning to do in that regard. I mean, I was telling someone at Ole Miss the other day that we used to go and talk to the student athletes at Ole Miss. Might have been when your dad was here, and we would kind of, as media, talk to them a little bit how to interact with us, which I don't know that you can do that anymore or want to do that anymore. There's so much out there, but we would do that.
Yeah.
So, not suggesting that is something we used to do.
I think so. I mean, I think that's wise, and it keeps, especially the younger that they are, keeps them from making a mistake that they can't take back. Like I said, especially after a game, I feel like those interviews, I know even for me, and I've done it 1,000 times, I kind of have to like take a step back. Okay, just make sure I'm not going to go say something I shouldn't say. Because emotions are high during a game and that kind of thing. And so I think that's always an interesting time to do an interview, is right after a game. It's just it's unique.
Rather do it on Tuesday morning.
It's a little easier on Tuesday for me.
Honey, you got any comments on something like that?
I mean, I just think respecting confidentiality is so huge. I think one of the unique things when you're in the sports writing business, like you're writing about something that it's a really popular subject, right? And so hopefully after earning great reputation with certain people, whether that's a coach or a player or whatnot, some people will be candid with you, and that's an honorable thing, right? That somebody would disclose something, but at the same time, you don't want to be known as someone that would then take that information and would improperly disclose that to some people, that would then take it, and you want to have this great credibility as someone that, hey, if this is off the record, that you honor that and that you always respect the individual first. And I think sometimes, I think Jared does a great job about this, like giving people the opportunity to see maybe before, if it's written, giving people the opportunity to see the finished product before it goes out, especially when you're talking about a kid. Just because that's the beauty of editing, right? Is like we always, when you're writing, I can go back and change a word if it's, just by me telling you one time over a phone call, I may have wished I'd said it a little differently the next day, and I'd love a chance to make sure I correctly. Well, it might even not be a controversial thing. I may have just wanted to correctly honor somebody that I forgot, And I think words matter, and you have a lot of power with the pen. So just, I think, be someone that has a great reputation on being that type of person.
And with so much media opportunities now, it's hard to take things back this day and age.
It is.
No doubt.
You go back and correct that quote that you hadn't put in the newspaper yet. I mean, it's already out there immediately, basically. I'm going to start with Dr. Norton. You're bound to have one question.
I think it might be more controversial than I should ask.
Okay. So we'll offer that to anybody else if you have questions afterwards. But anybody got a question that they want to ask either of our guests? Some of you that either what they've said or what they haven't gotten into yet. Anybody got questions?
Well, I'll ask you.
Dr. Norton's going to ask.
How would your dads be? They'd be thinking about that game. Would they get too intense for you at home?
My dad was pretty intense, so I think I knew to go play with the other coaches' kids on a day like that. But no, at the same time, like, my father was accessible, so I would definitely day of the game, practice. When school was out, I'm thinking it from a little kid standpoint. He was fine. He loved having me around. So it wasn't like on pins and needles. You can't go by dad, don't talk to dad, kind of thing. He wasn't like that.
Well, you already know that you were on the sidelines.
Yeah, no,
So
my dad wasn't like
he was
that either.
okay with you being
But
around.
I'll flip the script a little bit and tell a quick story about after a game. And so this was an important lesson for me to learn in my life. So I went to undergrad at the University of Tennessee. My wife went to Ole Miss, and so we went to high school together. And then she went to Ole Miss, I went to Tennessee. So we would see each other when we could, whatever, on the weekends. And I was working for the football team at Tennessee. My dad was the offense coordinator at the time. It was 2007, and we played at Alabama. And so my wife drove over to the game because she could see me after the game. And so I was going to get to see her for 15 minutes before we had to get on the bus and head back to Knoxville. And we got beat 42-14, and it was not a good day from our standpoint. And one of my jobs on game day was to pack everything up in the press box. The coaches would leave. They would have security escort them down. And one of my jobs was to stay and pack everything up and bring everything down. And I didn't have security escorting me down. And so one of my good friends from Hernando, actually, it was he and I, it was our job to do that. And so we, at Alabama, it's a long story, but the way from the press box back down to the locker room goes through all of the fans, right? So we don't have security. We're decked out in Tennessee orange from head to toe. And you can imagine people were not what I would say would be friendly to us. And it was rough. And so I'm already not very happy. We lost, played terrible. Then we kind of deal with that going all the way down to the field, whatever. So I see my wife, and I was rude and short-tempered and all these things. My now brother-in-law had just started dating my sister. I met him for the first time, and honestly was a jerk. Was just I was so mad. I was not thinking straight. Then my dad comes out of the locker room. He sees my wife, who's my girlfriend at the time. So happy to see her. Gives her a big hug, huge smile on his face. Thank you for coming. meets who is now his son-in-law for the first time, happy as he could be. He's not happy at all about the football game, but I learned a whole lot that day, and my wife let me hear about it too, and she told me this will never happen again. And I said, yes, ma'am, you're right, it won't. But I learned a lot from that day. I think about it a lot, and my dad handled that with so much better than I did, and so I learned a lot from that experience, which is, I guess, not before a game, but it's similar circumstance after a game.
Good story. Questions? Any other questions in here? And one, going once, twice. Henry's got a question.
Core values that we install. So core values is like a big buzzword really right now in athletics, right? And so I kind of, I don't know, I don't want to go too long, but the first time when I became a head coach, we instilled core values that I made up without talking to anybody else, and I really made them up. And maybe not the number one priority, but one of the top priorities was to make sure that it made a hashtag that we could use, right? And so, I mean, it meant nothing, right? Because nobody had anything invested in it except for me, and I really didn't have anything invested in it. So we went about it much differently later, and took input from players and coaches and discussed what it meant. And so with Oxford football, we have 5 core values, right? So we have energy, competition, family, toughness, and habits. Okay, and those were developed by the players with guidance from the coaches, and those same core values have been in place for 4 years, I guess, at this point. But I revisit them each year with the players, with the coaches, in an effort to make sure we're all still invested in those things. We all still believe in those things, and I think one of the biggest things, if you're ever leading an organization and looking at core values. Hunter and I talk about this a lot. We know that the ultimate goal of coaching football is not winning games, right? It's making a difference in young people's lives, and all, and that is more important. But it is also a goal of a program to win, right? And so I think it's important to show people, if this is going to be something we value, how does it benefit you? How does it benefit the organization, right? So we'll have meetings and talk about, hey, being, if we say we value energy, right? Well, what does that look like, first of all, right? It's not just a word, right? What does that look like if you're in the weight room? What does it look like if you're on the practice field? And then how does it help us win, right? Where is that going to show up during a game that's going to help us win a game, right? And then kind of go through things in that regard. So I think spending time talking about whatever your values are, right, which I think should be collectively developed, spending time talking about how they benefit people, I think is huge, right? It's not just a sign on the wall or something like that. It actually has meaning.
Last word, Hunter, because we're at the end of the time here. Just anything y'all want to either collectively or individually add for them, and then if you don't mind hanging around in a minute or two, they might have some questions.
No, last word. The thing I love what you're doing, what you're studying how to do, regardless if you go into this for the next 40 years or not, the ability to write and tell a story to get your point across I think is just a game-changing skill. It's something worth pursuing, developing, and mastering. And so this is an important class, and one that we continue to refine and hope to get better at ourselves. But I just value a lot what you're doing.
Yeah, I agree. I'll echo that because I think storytelling, people have done that long before we had any kind of, technology, internet, whatever the case may be. Storytelling's been an important part of human history for a long time. My dad talks about this idea he has. He likes to make homemade ice cream, and he says that he should open up an ice cream store, and you have to tell a great story to get ice cream. That's the cost, like not money. So he's not ever going to do it, but he talks about how that would be a great idea. So I do think storytelling is hugely important and admirable.
So I might write a story on your dad opening an ice cream store. That'd be great. You guys have got other places to go, but give them a round of applause for being here. And